the other night, Andy Baggerly has a piece about the Matt Chapman contract. And this is where Haruku was already on fire almost 2 hours before we even started recording.
He might have blown up. I mean, we haven't heard from him since the show started. I think he just caught fire.
So very early in the piece, Baggerly wrote, according to sources, the Giants executive board, led by Buster Posey, became so frustrated by the lack of immediate progress between Zaidi and agent Scott Boras after talks began in August that the ownership group took action. Sources said Posey personally dealt with Chapman to hammer out the basic structure of the contract, which includes a full no-trade provision, one of the sticking points that Zaidi had not included in the team's initial proposal. He would go on later to say that Farhan, because of Farhan's position, I don't think he could have circumvented Boras and gone straight to Chapman the way the rules work. So he would have had to work with Chapman or work with Boras. So based on the way Baggerly wrote it, it very much sounds like the executive board did not believe Farhan there was an urgency in what he was doing, which is what happened in the beginning of this year. Now, that urgency paid off in some ways because the Giants were able to sign Chapman and Snell very late in the ballgame. Another way you could read that is that Posey assisted Farhan in being able to directly communicate with Chapman. The way that Baggerly wrote it, I'm not sure that I read it in that way, but that's how Farhan tried to explain it after, was that it was kind of a team effort. But it doesn't sound like that is a pat on the back to Farhan as much as it is like a, dude, you're lagging on this thing. We need to get this thing done. We need some good news for this franchise instead of, being on the fringes with everything that they do. What was your take from that piece?
At first I felt the same way. At first I thought, man, this doesn't look good for Farhan. He can't close the deal. Ownership had to step in. But then you kind of dive into a little bit more and you start to remember, look, we're dealing with Scott Boras. You're dealing with a player who wants to stay with the Giants. But you also have Scott Boras, super agent, in his ear saying, hey, look, this deal that they're throwing out to you, that's your floor for when you go to free agency. You take that number into free agency and we take that and we give that to other teams. And all of a sudden that number is ballooning. So when you're dealing with that and you're head of baseball operations and you are, or a GM of a team and you're trying to get a deal done, if you can't get, again, for negotiation ethics sake, you can't go around the agent directly to the player. Now, ownership kind of has that caveat where they can go directly to the player and say, hey, look, we're paying you right now. We're the owners. We don't deal with your agent. If you want to stay here, here's the number. And here's the the bonuses and the extras we can do, like the no trade clause, which they, Buster Posey had to throw in there and say, look, we're doing a no trade clause. That's what you want, so you can stick around. So ownership has that extra incentive to jump in there and say, look, we don't have to deal with your agent, man. We don't owe anything to Scott Boras. That's between Scott Boras and Farhan. That's their relationship. Farhan's got his, I almost said Rolodex. Who's got a Rolodex?
He might. No, actually, he's an analytics guy.
He's an analytics.
Maybe Brian Sabian still has a Rolodex.
There is a good possibility. So he's got
Ned Coletti. Do you think Ned Coletti has a Rolodex?
Yeah, Ned Coletti. 100%. So Farhan's got that, he's got it in his contacts. He has so he can't go around and just say, hey, I'm just going to deal with the player, because then now you run into all kinds of problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if ownership doesn't, it's not a problem, because Farhan could say, hey, man, ownership stepped in.
Yeah.
My hands were tied. Okay, let's look at 10 other times ownership has come in and made a deal to close it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So back in 1976, George Steinbrenner at the time went to Reggie Jackson, $3 million a year. That's what Reggie wanted, $3 million a year. Think about that now. And so he gave it to Reggie. Reggie became Mr. October, written in stone. 2007, Hal Steinbrenner jumped in for the A-Rod deal to get that done. 2023, Hal Steinbrenner again, and we know this famously as Giants fans, jumped in at the midnight hour with Aaron Judge to get the deal done, because Judge went back to him directly, not to Cashman. He went to Steinbrenner and said, look, they're giving me this. I'm going here. And Steinbrenner said, oh, no, let's get this deal done. You go to Mike Ilitch for the White Sox, 2005, got the deal done with Maglio Ordonez, my love-hate relationship in fantasy baseball. I used to pick that guy up and drop him like every other week. 2012, Prince Fielder coming from Milwaukee. He said, hey, let's get this deal done in Detroit. Let's be done. John Middleton, owner of the Philadelphia Phillies, jumped in, and the Phillies have a great, in Amaro, they've got a fantastic GM, and Middleton jumped in 2019 to Bryce Harper, and he flew to Vegas to get the deal done. So that's an owner jumping in. Peter Angelos, 1998, the Albert Don't Call Me Joey Bell deal to bring him to Baltimore. Steve Cohn famously does deals on his own, even though he's got a GM and a head of baseball ops. 2021, Lindor and Scherzer. And then Tom Ricketts in 2014, again, stealing John Lester from us. We didn't get the rose at the last minute, but the Cubs gave John Lester the rose. So those are just 10 examples of ownership jumping in because they needed to at the last minute. Because again, when you've got a relationship between GM and a head of baseball ops and an agent, you can't always go directly to the player, because you've got to deal with it ethically. And again, owners don't need to. So I look at it as just kind of, hey, that's what needed to happen to get this deal done. I think Farhan probably knew it, and I'm not defending Farhan. Look, that could have been the nail in his coffin, because again, Baggerly in the article pretty much said if Buster Posey and ownership and Farhan aren't on the same page going forward with a lot of these deals, then they're going to make a change. Farhan's not going to be there anymore. But I think I'm going to look at this as a one-off type of thing. And again, we don't know. Did ownership jump in with Jung-Hoo Lee? Did ownership jump in with Snell? We don't know these things 100%, but maybe in the next, coming week or so, things will start to come out. And especially if Farhan is fired, I think we're going to hear a lot more about kind of what went down. But as of right now, I'm just kind of, I'm not too alarmed about this predicament.
The one thing that makes me think is Buster Posey's a leader. He was a leader on the team. He was, from his rookie year, he was a leader on the team. He's a leader in the clubhouse. He's very opinionated on things about the baseball team. And he has been very vocal of late about how the Giants need to be in the mix on not only these players, but they need to be in the mix when it comes to winning divisions and all of that stuff. So that he's been vocal about that.
Yeah.
Now, if it was an assist to Farhan, like Farhan's like, hey man, we may need some help getting this thing done, and Buster pops in and talks to Chapman. There's respect there. Great. If Farhan was given a directive like, this is something we want done now, and Farhan couldn't get it done, and Buster got frustrated and kind of just decided that he was going to go directly and make it happen, that's a little bit of a different thing. And that second thing makes me worry about Farhan's future. But here's the third thing. I just said that Buster's leader. Buster is in charge. He's just got that kind of persona about him. Who would be his chosen guy if he was the one. Like I don't even who controls, who hires your baseball ops guy? Greg Johnson. If Greg Johnson is like, hey, Buster, you have my ear. If we make this move, I need your sign off. Who is Buster looking at? Who's doing that research? Who's got the eyes on future GMs? Who's got the eyes on organizations that you want to model? That's the piece that I'm interested in learning more about. Is Buster that in the weeds where he's got an idea of who he wants to be the guy who's making the decisions? That's something that I hope somebody asks him the next time he gets interviewed, because if he's that in the weeds, then I'm not so sure that Farhan is that much in the future. And then you also have Bob Melvin tied to Farhan. They are close. Then is Melvin the guy, the right manager? Being that he's a former catcher, I would imagine he and Buster have had conversations, not saying that because they are both catchers that they have to be best buds, but that is kind of the model, I'm sure, of the mentality that Buster would like a manager to have, is somebody who is that in control. And, Melvin might be old school, and he might have some, grouchy old man comments, but at the same time, it does seem like he looks for that respect from his team and from his young team. I mean, the younger players are those who seemingly get the wrath of Bob Melvin there because of the mistakes that they're making. So I don't know, that whole, I thought that was a fascinating thing, and I can't wait. It's like almost like a really good TV show. I can't wait to see what happens next.
I think so. So my thought on that, and I like that. I like that because I would like to know too, like, how do you make the decision to hire Farhan? How do you make the decision to let Sabian go? Who is making those decisions? And is there a committee? Is there a board? How does that go? But if you're Buster Posey, I don't see, he's such a baseball guy, such a baseball mind. I don't see him buying a baseball team to make money. That's not what he's there for. He's there to win baseball games as an
Influence.
owner.
He wants his
In
influence to be felt. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so the fact that he's there and the fact that he's in on negotiations with Chapman to get the deal done, everybody, I know a lot of people are screaming about it today, but I think that actually bodes well for the organization. I think that's what you want. Do you want Larry Baer in negotiations, or do you want Buster Posey in baseball player negotiations? I want Buster Posey. That's who I want. I want a proven winner. I want a guy who knows what it takes on the inside of the clubhouse to win a championship. And I think, honestly, I think he also probably thinks that Bob Melvin is the guy. It's just a matter of getting him the players, getting him the firepower. Again, that article that we talked about last week, Bob Melvin's just getting his feet under him with this roster. It doesn't mean that the first half is going to be ugly and then he gets his feet under him and learns everybody. In the second half, they blow up and they win, 70% of their games. It just means that now he's seen the roster, and both Buster Posey and Bob Melvin and Farhan, actually all three of them, have alluded to the fact that we know what this roster needs now next year. We've evaluated and we know, but we can't say it because we don't want it to be a detriment to some of the players that are still here. So they know what moves they're going to make. They know what changes they need to make, what positions they need to make changes at. So I do have some faith going forward, and I do think, Buster Posey's an owner. Does he sell part of the ownership down the line and become head of baseball ops? Sure, why not? I mean,
that's an interesting thing, right? Because the models that the Giants use, I don't imagine Buster Posey is interested in like having to figure out and go by these models. Like he seems to be a little bit
just
more
wants to
interested.
close deals.
Yeah, I know what we need. I'll use my influence and I'll help.
Sure.
But here's what you basically said. The interesting side of that is maybe Farhan is the right personality and the right temperament. He is not this giant personality, right? He's not
Right.
this in your face, I'm the best GM. He's kind of quiet. But maybe if Buster wants to be the face of the organization and he wants to be the influence or the mentality or he wants the rhythm of the team and the culture to kind of fit who he was, that is kind of a big shadow that a lot of ops people probably would not be okay with. Like, I'm thinking of like the top ops folks in the game, the guy that runs the Dodgers, I forget his name, but guys like that, maybe they'd have a problem with being in this Buster shadow if that is where we are going. Because if you tell me in 2025 Buster's going to have a bigger role in the organization, I'm like, great, I'm in.
Yeah.
I will give you one warning signal though. Derek Jeter. Now, Derek Jeter, he did not have a role in the Yankees organization.
Right.
But he did have a role with the Marlins. I think he was also a part owner of the Marlins, and he did not like it. He got out of there pretty quickly, and now you see him on TV. I still don't know if it fits his personality best, but it is better than, you know, what he was as kind of a, you know, being in the ownership group.
Yeah.
If Buster feels like this is his spot, then yeah, let's make him a bigger part of it. Let's make him the face. Let's have him kind of help us sell these tickets, you know, have him give the plus ones to some of these players. And yeah, you know, the reason why we signed Chapman is because he reminds me of the kind of mentality that we had in 2014, you know, those kind of things, because they do need to sell tickets. And the one thing the Giants are very good at is reminiscing about the past. Can you tie a little bit of that with your current crew? Can Jung-Hoo Lee have some photo ops where, you know, he and Buster are hanging out and talking hitting? You know, can you have Patrick Bailey and Buster Posey in conversations talking about how to control a pitching staff? Like, I think all of those things are positive. Not that Buster has to just be like a poster for the team, like a marketing gimmick. I would just like him to be more involved, just like whenever Barry is at training camp or spring training and he's talking hitting. You're like, if someone's going to teach me hitting, it might as well be the best guy, you know, who's done it in our organization. So those kind of things I think are pretty important. And that's why I don't mind seeing Buster throwing his weight around a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I mean, he is kind of a laid back dude, not laid back dude, but he doesn't like to be in the spotlight so much since retirement. So this type of stuff, I don't know if it's going to turn him off and say, man, don't go reporting on this type of stuff, or if he's going to step up and say, hey, look, it worked. You know, the influence worked, and ownership's going to push him a little bit more and say, hey, you're our guy, man. So it'd be interesting to see going forward.